What happens when a bear, rescued from the wild, grows up thinking he's a dog? It sounds like something out of a fairy tale, but for one lucky bear, it's his reality that it was a rainy day when the team at the Wildlife Rescue Center received an emergency call. A bear cub, just a few months old, had been found wandering near a highway. Injured, confused, and with nowhere else to turn, he had been brought in for care. His mother had likely been killed by poachers, leaving him to fend for himself in the unforgiving wild. But this bear cub wasn't ready to survive on his own just yet. He needed help. Sarah, the lead caretaker, had seen her fair share of animals in distress, but this little bear? He was different. His fur was matted, his ribs too visible, and his eyes, wide with fear, held something she hadn't expected: trust. "Hey there, little guy," she murmured, offering him a bowl of water. The bear cub took it slowly, his tiny paws trembling. With uncertainty, he had been through so much. Yet here he was, showing the first signs of hope. First, the bear was wary of the humans. They were strangers, after all, but Sarah knew this was just the beginning of a long journey. They gave him a safe, quiet enclosure, far away from the hustle and bustle of the center, to allow him time to heal. They named him Max. Max was small, even for a bear, and his body was fragile. But Sarah and her team worked tirelessly, feeding him the right foods, making sure he stayed hydrated, and gently coaxing him to trust again. They were careful not to push him too hard. After all, a bear's instinct is to stay distant from humans. But Max was different. Slowly, he started to relax. Slowly, he began to trust. Weeks passed, and Max grew stronger. His coat became shinier, and his eyes, once filled with fear, began to show a glimmer of curiosity. It was clear that he had survived this far because of his incredible will to live. He was becoming something more, something that could thrive, perhaps even be returned to the wild one day. But there was something else happening. Max, for reasons no one could explain, seemed to prefer the company of humans over other animals. The more Sarah spent time with him, the more she realized something truly unusual was happening. Max wasn't just healing physically. He was forming bonds with the humans, yes, but also with other creatures. One day, Sarah opened the enclosure door to check on Max. To her surprise, he didn't shy away. Instead, he stood, watching her with those wide, innocent eyes. "Hey there, buddy," Sarah said, stepping closer. The bear stepped forward, his movements slow but determined, his curiosity outweighing his caution. Max had formed a bond with Sarah that seemed almost dog-like. He followed her from one end of the enclosure to the other, just like a puppy. His trust was unconditional, his dependence on her undeniable. There was no fear in his eyes now, only the need for companionship. Sarah's heart swelled as she crouched down to his level. "You're something special, aren't you?" she whispered, scratching behind his ears. Max closed his eyes, leaning into her touch, a sound somewhere between a grunt and a sigh escaping his lips. But there was something even more surprising. Max had started imitating human behavior. He didn't just eat his meals like a bear would. No, Max seemed to have learned something from his human caregivers, a strange, unexpected behavior that no one had anticipated. And soon, the stage was set for the most unexpected twist of all: Max's growing affection for a family dog, which would change everything. Max had been at the wildlife rescue for a few months now, and though he had come a long way from the frightened cub he had once been, something was missing. He was lonely. Even though Sarah and the rest of the team had given him all the attention and care he needed, Max yearned for something more. Enter Buddy, the rescue center's family dog, a cheerful, energetic golden retriever who had a heart as big as his paws. Buddy was everything Max wasn't: playful, carefree, and full of energy. But when the two of them first met, it wasn't exactly love at first sight. Max was still learning how to interact with other animals, and Buddy, with his boisterous personality, didn't help matters. Buddy's initial enthusiasm made Max nervous. But there was something about Buddy's presence that was oddly comforting, even though Max didn't know it yet. One day, Sarah opened the enclosure door and allowed Buddy inside. Max watched warily as the dog bounded in, wagging his tail. Buddy sniffed the air, clearly excited to meet the bear. First, Max took a few cautious steps backward. But then, something incredible happened. Max, despite his size and wild nature, took a few steps forward, almost as if drawn to Buddy's energy. The two animals stood in a tense silence before Buddy gave Max a friendly nudge with his nose. It was simple, innocent, but to Max, it was the beginning of something new. The next few days were filled with funny, unexpected moments. Max would cautiously follow Buddy around the enclosure, watching the dog's every move. Whenever Buddy barked, Max would tilt his head to the side, confused but intrigued. Sometimes, Buddy would roll around on the grass, trying to get Max to join in. At first, Max just watched. But soon, he began to mimic Buddy's playful movements. He would flop onto the ground, his big paws flailing around like Buddy's. As the days passed, the bond between Max and Buddy deepened. Max started to imitate Buddy's actions more and more, and Buddy seemed to take it all in stride. They would play together, run together, and even sleep beside each other. Max would curl up next to Buddy at night, his massive body lying gently beside the dog. But it wasn't just the play that began to affect Max. The way Buddy acted, his calm demeanor, his unspoken affection, seemed to soothe Max's once anxious nature. The bear had gone from being fearful and isolated to becoming part of the family. "I never thought I'd see the day," Sarah said one evening as she watched Max and Buddy play together. "It's like Max thinks he's a dog." It was strange, but as Sarah observed their interactions, she realized that Max wasn't just mimicking Buddy. He was connecting with him in a way that was deeply emotional, not just an animal's instinct, but something more profound. One afternoon, Sarah decided to let Max and Buddy spend some time outside in the open field. Max had grown stronger, and Buddy had been so patient with him. She watched from a distance as Max followed Buddy across the field, trying to keep up with the dog's quick pace. Buddy, being the playful dog he was, suddenly darted in front of Max, jumping and rolling. Max hesitated for a moment, confused by the dog's antics. But then, something incredible happened. Max crouched down, his body low to the ground, and for the first time ever, he copied Buddy's playful movements. Max tried to wag his tail like Buddy, though it didn't quite work. But the excitement in his eyes, the joy he found in the simple act of play, was undeniable. Sarah watched in awe as Max awkwardly chased Buddy, finally figuring out how to engage in the game. The two animals played together, bounding across the grass, with Max's massive body not quite as agile as Buddy's, but full of enthusiasm. It was a heartwarming sight. A bear who had once been an orphaned, confused cub, now playing like a dog with his best friend. Over time, Max's behavior became even more dog-like. He began to bark, or at least try to. The sound was a strange mixture of a growl and a yelp, but he clearly had the intent. Max had begun to imitate Buddy in every way. He followed Buddy to the front door of the house, waiting for Sarah to let them in, his big paws tapping against the ground impatiently. At night, Max would curl up beside Buddy on the couch, resting his head on the dog's soft fur. When Buddy wagged his tail, Max would mimic the motion, his own large body trembling with excitement. "You're not a dog, Max," Sarah would laugh softly, watching the two of them. But the more she observed them, the more it became clear. Max thought he was. And in many ways, he had become one. Max and Buddy's bond only grew stronger. They became inseparable, two friends from different worlds who had found a way to connect. It wasn't just about imitation anymore. It was about understanding, companionship, and unconditional love. Sarah and the team at the rescue center knew that Max had become more than just a bear. He had found a family in Buddy, and in that family, he had found peace. It was a bond that transcended species, something truly beautiful. As Max continued to behave more and more like a dog, Sarah couldn't help but feel conflicted. She watched him play with Buddy, sleep by his side, and even imitate Buddy's barking. She couldn't deny that it was endearing, but there were moments of concern. "Is this normal?" Jason, another caretaker, asked one day, watching Max playfully chase his own tail, just like Buddy. "I'm not sure," Sarah admitted. "It's definitely strange, but I don't think it's harmful." But deep down, Sarah was worried. Max was a bear. He had instincts, a nature that was wild and unpredictable. She couldn't help but wonder if, in his quest for companionship, Max was losing sight of who he truly was. The conflict weighed heavily on Sarah's heart. She wanted Max to be happy, to find peace, but she couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that something was off. Was this bear adapting to a new life, Or was he losing his wild nature? I love him, Jason, Sarah said one evening, watching Max curl up beside Buddy on the couch. But is he really okay? Is this what's best for him? Jason glanced over at Max, his heart softening. He seems happy, doesn't he? Maybe this is his way of finding peace, of adapting to a life with humans. Jason glanced over at Max, his heart softening. He seems happy, doesn't he? Maybe this is his way of finding peace, of adapting to a life with humans. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that the wild instincts Max had once known were being slowly replaced by the familiar, safe life of a domesticated animal. She wanted to give him a future that was true to who he was. But was that future one of wild freedom or a peaceful life with his best friend? One morning, the decision was forced upon them. Max, as if on instinct, tried to chase a wild deer that wandered near the edge of the rescue center's land. His movements were awkward, clumsy, but the drive was unmistakable. It was a flash of the wild nature that had been dormant for so long that he took off after the deer, his heavy steps pounding against the earth. But then, halfway through the chase, Max stopped. He looked back at Buddy, who was lying in the grass, watching him. Max hesitated, his wild instincts wrestling with the safety and comfort of his dog-like bond. Max turned back toward the safety of the enclosure, walking slowly toward Buddy. His wild instincts had come to the surface, but they weren't enough to make him leave the life he had built. The turning point had come, and Max had made his choice. He would stay, not as a dog, not as a wild bear, but as something entirely new. Max continued to live at the rescue center, his bond with Buddy growing deeper every day. He wasn't just a dog, and he wasn't just a wild bear. He had found his place somewhere in between, a balance of comfort and wildness, peace and freedom. Sarah watched Max and Buddy play together one last time, knowing that this was Max's life now. Not wild, not domestic, but truly his own. As Sarah reflected on Max's journey, she realized that sometimes the greatest gift we can give an animal is the chance to be who they are, in the way that works best for them. Max had been given a second chance, and in doing so, he had given Sarah and the team a lesson in love, acceptance, and the power of companionship.